13,000 years ago, North America was not the world we know today. Massive glaciers covered the north. Endless frozen plains stretched across the continent. And through this brutal Ice Age landscape moved giant creatures that no longer exist. Mammoths, ancient bison, saber-toothed predators. Then suddenly, a new kind of hunter appeared. Archaeologists would later call them the Clovis people. They carried beautifully crafted stone spears unlike anything seen before. Sharp, symmetrical, deadly. Across the plains of ancient America, they hunted mammoths in coordinated groups, tracking enormous beasts through snow, mud, and frozen valleys. For a brief moment in history, they spread across much of North America, and then they vanished. No cities, no monuments, no written records, only broken spear points buried beneath the earth. What happened to them? Were they destroyed by a collapsing climate at the end of the Ice Age? Did the extinction of the mammoths destroy their way of life? Or is the truth even stranger? Because today, some archaeologists believe the Clovis people may not have been the first Americans at all. And if that is true, then the story of America began long before anyone ever imagined. The first Americans may not have disappeared. They may have been erased by a world collapsing around them. 13,000 years ago, North America was a completely different world. Much of the continent lay trapped beneath enormous sheets of ice. To the north, the Laurentide ice sheet stretched for thousands of kilometers, a frozen wall so massive it reshaped rivers, mountains, and entire ecosystems. Winter storms swept endlessly across the plains. Glaciers creaked like living mountains, and the air itself carried the cold breath of the Ice Age. But despite the brutal climate, this ancient world was alive. Across the frozen grasslands roamed gigantic herds of mammoths. Their curved tusks gleamed beneath pale sunlight as they searched for buried vegetation under snow and ice. Nearby moved giant bison, far larger than the ones seen in America today. Some weighed over a ton and traveled in thunderous herds across the open plains. And hidden in the shadows were predators from another age. Saber-toothed cats stalked silently through the tall Ice Age grass. Dire wolves hunted in packs. Short-faced bears, among the largest land predators in North American history, wandered the wilderness in search of food. This was not the America of cities and highways. It was a prehistoric frontier ruled by survival. And somewhere beyond the frozen horizon, humans were coming. During the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower than today. Between Siberia and Alaska, a massive land bridge emerged from the ocean. Scientists now call it Beringia. For thousands of years, it connected Asia and North America. Small groups of hunters slowly crossed this harsh land, following migrating animals into an unknown continent. They carried stone tools, animal hides, and fire. But more importantly, they carried the beginning of a new human story in the Americas. Nobody knows exactly how difficult the journey was. Some may have died in blizzards. Others may have vanished in the frozen wilderness forever. But those who survived kept moving southward, through ice-free corridors, across rivers, mountains, and endless plains. And eventually, their descendants would become known as the Clovis people. For thousands of years, the Clovis people were forgotten beneath the earth. Their camps disappeared. Their hunting grounds vanished beneath layers of dust and time. And then, in the early 20th century, something extraordinary was uncovered in the American Southwest. Near the town of Clovis, archaeologists discovered ancient stone spear points buried alongside the bones of extinct Ice Age animals. The discovery shocked researchers, because these weapons were unlike anything ever found before. Long, sharp, perfectly symmetrical. But the most mysterious feature was a deep groove carved into the base of each spear point. Archaeologists called this technique the fluted point. The groove allowed the spearhead to be tightly attached to wooden shafts, creating powerful hunting weapons capable of bringing down enormous Ice Age animals. To ancient hunters, these were masterpieces of survival technology. Soon, similar spear points began appearing across North America, from deserts to grasslands to ancient river valleys. The same style, the same craftsmanship. It became clear that this was not an isolated tribe. This was an entire culture. Archaeologists named them after the place where they were first discovered, the Clovis culture. And for decades, American archaeology believed something even bigger, that the Clovis people were the very first humans to enter the Americas. The theory became known as Clovis first. According to this idea, humans crossed from Siberia into Alaska during the Ice Age, then moved south through an ice-free corridor as the glaciers began to retreat. From there, they spread rapidly across North America. For much of the 20th century, this theory dominated textbooks, museums, and scientific research. To many Americans, the story of the continent began with Clovis, but science would eventually uncover a disturbing problem. Evidence started appearing in places that seemed older than Clovis itself. And if those discoveries were true, then one of the biggest theories in American archaeology was about to collapse. The Clovis people lived in one of the most dangerous worlds in human history, and to survive, they hunted giants. Mammoths could weigh over 6 tons. Their tusks were longer than a man was tall. One wrong move could mean death beneath crushing feet or curved ivory tusks. Yet somehow, these Ice Age hunters learned how to bring them down. The Clovis people did not fight mammoths alone. They hunted in coordinated groups, using teamwork, planning, and patience. Archaeologists believe hunters tracked herds across enormous distances, following migration routes through frozen plains and river valleys. Sometimes they waited for the perfect moment. A weakened animal, a muddy riverbank, a narrow canyon with no escape. Then the attack began. Hunters surrounded the mammoth from multiple directions, shouting, throwing spears, and forcing the animal into confusion. The Clovis spear points were deadly weapons. Their sharp, fluted blades could pierce deep into flesh when launched with great force. Some researchers believe the hunters used spear throwers to increase speed and power, turning stone-tipped weapons into lethal projectiles. Even then, the hunt remained incredibly dangerous. A charging mammoth could kill multiple hunters in seconds, but the reward was enormous. One successful hunt provided meat, fat, bone, hide, and tools for an entire group. Nothing was wasted. Bones became weapons and needles. Hides became shelter and clothing. Fat became fuel during brutal winters. The mammoth was not just prey. It was the center of survival itself. And so the Clovis people kept moving, following the great herds across Ice Age North America, across snowy grasslands, through frozen valleys, beneath skies filled with wind and ice. For generations, this way of life sustained them. But the world around them was beginning to change. The climate was warming, the glaciers were retreating, and the great animals they depended on were slowly disappearing. Then, the world began to change. At the end of the Ice Age, temperatures across North America slowly started to rise. The massive glaciers that had dominated the continent for thousands of years began to melt. Rivers expanded. Forests spread northward. Ancient grasslands slowly disappeared beneath new ecosystems. For many animals, survival became harder with each passing century. And then something strange happened. Around 12,900 years ago, Earth suddenly plunged back into extreme cold. Scientists call this mysterious period the Younger Dryas. In what should have been a warming world, temperatures abruptly dropped again. Violent climate instability spread across the planet. Some regions became colder, others became drier. Storm patterns shifted unpredictably. Entire ecosystems were thrown into chaos. The giant Ice Age animals that once dominated North America began disappearing one by one. Mammoths vanished. Giant ground sloths disappeared. Ancient horses and massive bison populations collapsed. For the Clovis people, this was catastrophic. Their world had been built around the great herds. Now those herds were dying. The hunters who once followed mammoths across endless plains suddenly faced a terrifying reality. The animals they depended on were disappearing forever. Food became harder to find. Migration routes changed. Old hunting territories no longer sustained human life. Some groups may have moved south in search of survival. Others may have split apart into smaller communities. And as the climate crisis intensified, the Clovis culture itself began to fade. Archaeologists noticed something eerie in the archaeological record. After a certain point, the famous Clovis spear points almost completely disappeared. It was as if an entire culture had suddenly dissolved into history. No great battle, no final city, no written explanation, only silence. And somewhere beneath the melting glaciers of a dying Ice Age world, the story of the Clovis people was coming to an end. For decades, scientists have argued over one haunting question: what truly killed the mammoths? And hidden behind that mystery lies another question even more disturbing. Did humans help destroy the Ice Age world? One theory blames the Clovis hunters themselves. It is known as the overhunting hypothesis. According to this idea, the Clovis people became too successful. As they spread across North America, they hunted mammoths, giant bison, and other massive animals faster than those species could recover. The giant creatures of the Ice Age had never faced human hunters this skilled before. Stone spear points, coordinated attacks, relentless migration following the herds. Some researchers believe the arrival of Clovis hunters triggered a wave of extinction across the continent. A slow ecological collapse caused not by nature alone, but by humans. If true, it may have been one of the earliest environmental disasters caused by our species. But not everyone agrees. Many scientists argue that the real killer was climate catastrophe. At the end of the Ice Age, temperatures shifted violently during the Younger Dryas period. Ecosystems changed faster than many species could adapt. Grasslands vanished. Water systems changed. Food chains collapsed. In this theory, mammoths were already dying long before humans could wipe them out. The Clovis people were not executioners. They were survivors trapped inside a collapsing world. And then there is a third theory, one that sounds almost unbelievable. Some researchers believe a comet or asteroid may have exploded over North America near the beginning of the Younger Dryas. The impact could have triggered massive fires, sudden cooling, and environmental devastation across the continent. To this day, the theory remains controversial. Some scientists reject it completely. Others believe the evidence is still growing. But regardless of which explanation is true, the result was the same. The mammoths disappeared, the Ice Age ended, and shortly afterward, the Clovis culture vanished with it. For most of the 20th century, American archaeology believed one thing with absolute confidence: Clovis came first. But then, new discoveries began to challenge everything. Thousands of kilometers south of North America, in Monte Verde, archaeologists uncovered something astonishing: ancient campfires, wooden structures, stone tools, preserved pieces of human activity buried deep beneath the earth. The site was eventually dated to more than 14,000 years ago, older than Clovis. At first, many scientists refused to believe it. The discovery threatened one of the foundations of American archaeology. If people were already living in South America before Clovis appeared in North America, then the entire timeline of human migration had to be rewritten. But the surprises did not end there. In the deserts of White Sands National Park, researchers discovered something even more haunting: ancient human footprints, frozen in mud thousands of years ago, then preserved beneath layers of sediment for millennia. Some of those footprints may be over 20,000 years old. If the dating is correct, humans were already living in North America during the height of the Ice Age, long before the Clovis culture existed. The implications are enormous. It means the first Americans may have arrived far earlier than scientists once imagined. Perhaps they traveled along Pacific coastlines by boat. Perhaps small groups crossed Beringia long before the glaciers retreated. Or perhaps multiple waves of humans entered the Americas over thousands of years. Suddenly, Clovis no longer looked like the beginning of the story. Instead, they became one chapter in a much older human journey. A journey still hidden beneath deserts, caves, ancient shorelines, and forgotten landscapes across the Americas. And the deeper archaeologists dig into the past, the more mysterious the first Americans become. And then, the Clovis culture disappeared. For archaeologists, the change is impossible to ignore. Across North America, the famous Clovis spear points suddenly stopped appearing in the archaeological record. The beautifully fluted weapons that once spread across the continent became increasingly rare, until they vanished almost entirely. It was as if an entire world had quietly faded away. But unlike fallen empires of later history, the Clovis people left no written explanation behind. No final battle, no abandoned cities, no ancient chronicles describing what happened. Only silence buried beneath the earth. So where did they go? Some researchers believe the Clovis population simply collapsed as mammoths and other giant Ice Age animals disappeared. Without the great herds, their hunting-based way of life may have become impossible to sustain. Small communities could have broken apart, struggling to survive in a rapidly changing environment. Others believe the Clovis people adapted rather than vanished. Over time, they may have merged into newer cultures across North America, changing their tools, traditions, and survival strategies as the Ice Age ended. In this theory, the Clovis people did not die out. They transformed. Their descendants may have continued living across the continent for thousands of years, no longer recognizable as Clovis to modern archaeologists. There is also the possibility of migration. As climates shifted and ecosystems changed, some groups may have moved into new territories, following rivers, forests, and surviving animal populations deeper into the Americas. But the truth is, nobody knows for certain, and that uncertainty is what makes the Clovis mystery so powerful. Because the Clovis people were among the first humans to spread across Ice Age North America. They hunted mammoths beneath frozen skies. They survived one of the harshest environments in human history, and yet today, almost everything about their disappearance remains unknown. Only fragments remain: broken spear points, ancient bones, footprints fading into stone, tiny echoes of a people swallowed by time. The Clovis people left behind no written language, no kings, no pyramids, no temples carved into stone. They built no massive cities that survived the ages. No monuments rose above the horizon to preserve their memory. And yet, 13,000 years ago, they walked across the vast wilderness of North America. They crossed frozen plains beneath Ice Age skies. They hunted mammoths in lands untouched by modern civilization. They survived blizzards, predators, and a world that was constantly changing around them. For a brief moment in human history, they became one of the first great cultures of the Americas. And then they disappeared into time. Today, only fragments remain. A spear point buried beneath ancient soil. A footprint preserved in desert stone. A broken bone beside the remains of a mammoth. Tiny echoes of forgotten people who once stood at the edge of a frozen world. But perhaps the greatest mystery is not how the Clovis people vanished. It is how climate itself may have helped erase entire civilizations from history. Because thousands of years after the Clovis disappeared, humanity would face another catastrophic climate disaster. A global drought so devastating that kingdoms collapsed, cities were abandoned, and entire civilizations vanished across the ancient world. And in the next episode, we explore the terrifying event known as the 4.2 kilo-year drought, the climate catastrophe that may have changed human history forever.